Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is Alton and I am so glad that you could join me today. It is a balmy -3 below freezing, and so I'm out here today enjoying the beautiful sunshine out on Georgian Bay. Now the other day, a friend of mine was asking me about a Casio G-Shock. He's a new collector and he's decided that he wants to add a rugged, dependable G-Shock to the mix, and he said, which one should I get? I said, what are you looking at? He said, 2 entry-level G-Shocks, the Square and the Casiaok. Now, which one should I get? And I said, both. But of course, he wasn't in the market for both. He wanted just one. So the question we're going to ask today is, if you had to choose between this or this, which one would you choose? Today, it's a battle. Hi everybody, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're in for a treat. We are looking at a head-to-head battle. Casio versus Casio, G-Shock versus G-Shock. If you're in the market for your very first G-Shock, an entry-level version, which should it be? Should it be the classic Square or the new and upcoming Casiaok? That is what we will determine today. Before we begin, listen, you need to know I am not a Casio expert, and you will probably disagree with me, but I'm going to give you my view of things, and hopefully for some of you, you will find this interesting, entertaining, but hopefully also informative. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to look at brand history, design, movement, performance, quality, durability, versatility, and value. We're going to total it all up and declare a winner. Again, a lot of this is going to be subjective. Why don't we get into it right away and talk about brand history? Casio was founded in 1946 in Japan in the aftermath of World War II. The founder, Tadao Casio, started out by producing mechanical parts of all things. He was joined later by his brothers, who had expertise in electronics. By 1949, they had begun producing calculators using the knowledge they had both gained from mechanical parts and electronics. In the 1950s, they successfully produced Japan's first electronic calculator, and it was small enough to be portable. Now, I know that's hard to believe that this was a huge technological advancement, but that only serves to highlight how far we have come in the last 70 years. The success of Casio calculators led the family business to focus on electronics, and they soon turned their attention to the fledgling computer market, and by the 1970s, Casio was a household name across the world. However, it wasn't until 1974 that Casio launched its most ubiquitous product yet, the Casio watch. In 1974, the Casio company stood on the forefront of mass-produced quartz watches. The very first digital watch was called the Casiotron, which, if you ask me, sounds like a Decepticon, but it sold like wildfire. Released in November 1974, which was 2 years before I was born, the Casiotron displayed hours, minutes, seconds, and a calendar on an LCD display. The Casiotron was the first ever digital watch to include a calendar function, and it was one of the early adopters of LCD technology. These functions might be taken for granted today, but in the 1970s, this was groundbreaking technology. With the success of their digital quartz watches, Casio took their technology even further than digital watches had ever been before. They began developing their famed G-Shock range, which became the precursors for the robust digital watches that are still around today. No longer were watches delicate and fragile and subject to water penetration. The G-Shock introduced the world to a rugged yet technologically refined watch that could survive almost anything. They were water resistant, shock-proof, and of course accurate in timekeeping. Introduced in 1987, the DW5600 became the first G-Shock to be distributed in more than 2 model versions. Previous G-Shocks, such as the DW5000 and the WW5100 and the DW5200 and so on, were only released in silver and gold varieties. But the screwback DW5600 had 9 different model versions between 1987 and 1992. For many, when they think of G-Shock, they think of the classic G-Shock Square. By comparison, the G-Shock GA2100, or Casiaok, as it has been nicknamed by watch enthusiasts who first noticed that the new Anti-Digi Casio bore at least a passing resemblance to the AP Royal Oak, has only been on the market for a few years. But here, we are scoring according to brand history, not the history of each piece. So I'm going to give them both a solid 8 out of 10 for brand history. Although Casio has not been manufacturing watches for even half as long as some of our most senior watch brands, they rank high for their contribution to horology and technology in the 47 years that they have been producing wristwatches. Next, we turn to design. And here, I'm mainly looking at how well form serves function and how attractive that form is in doing so. The G-Shock Square is not a revolutionary design by today's standards, mainly because, well, they set the standard. Now, the watch is called a square, but it's actually octagonal with a stretched appearance east to west. Even the display is rectangular, not square. Still, square is what enthusiasts call the DW5600, and so square is what we shall call it as well. The square is 43.5 millimeters at its widest point, and 49 millimeters lug to lug. It's 12.3 to 13 millimeters thick, depending on how you measure it, and it has a lug opening of 16 millimeters, but given the integrated nature of the strap, that dimension is to largely be discounted. In spite of its large size, even the smaller wristed among us can easily wear this digital Casio because of the way the integrated rubber band curves down and hugs the wrist. It needs to be said that, unlike the Casiaok, there are many variations of G-Shock squares. Some have metal bodies, solar charging, better modules, even Bluetooth capability. But in order to keep things fair, we are pitting the entry-level Square 5600 against the GA2100, which sits mostly within the same price range depending on color and availability. To this end, we find a fairly simple watch, designed with precision of purpose. The shape of the watch presents a large space for the LCD display, so it's extremely legible. It has 4 simple pushers on the sides to switch between modes and settings and illumination. The outer case is resin, which protects an inner metal case, which cradles the important guts, ensuring that whether diving up to 200 meters or jogging on a Sunday morning, you are going to be able to tell the time easily and at a glance. Being that this is a G-Shock, the entire design is centered around minimizing shock and maximizing viewing real estate. And while the square is not necessarily going to earn you admiring glances in the boardroom, it's still an attractive design that looks good in its proper environment and simply does what it needs to do. For this reason, I give it a solid 8 in the design department. The GA2100 is a newcomer to the Casio lineup, and in many ways it takes some design cues from the traditional square. The GA2100 is also 8-sided, but this time it's not stretched out, but it's proportional for a truer octagonal shape. Like the square, it has 4 pushers on the sides and a digital display with similar features. You can access alarms, time zones, dates, and illumination with these pushers, just as on the square. But this time, the display is shrunk considerably in order to account for the large day display on the left and analog-style handset that makes its way around the dial every 12 hours. Unlike the square, the Casioak has applied lume on those added hour and minute hands, while also providing illumination in the form of a single LED between the 4 and 5. It really is the Anti-Digi function of this Casio that distinguishes it from its all-digital bigger brother. But there is another difference that can easily go unseen, and that's the carbon core guard tech that's incorporated into the case. The case is constructed with a thin layer of carbon fiber in order to bolster its strength, so the overall amount of material used in the case can be decreased without sacrificing any sort of material strength. As a result, the case is only 11.8 millimeters tall, and even more, it wraps around the wrist in a way that makes it feel even thinner. Its plastic case is practically weightless if you're used to wearing an even modestly proportioned 316L stainless steel case. By design, the strap is angled down so that there's little room at any point between the 48.5 millimeter case and the watch. All of this adds up to a really neat design that is rugged and attractive, but I'm going to rank the Casioak a little lower than the Square by giving it a 7. Now, before you stop watching and start commenting, the reason I rate it a little bit lower is because the ani-digi nature of the watch has necessitated some compromises. First is the light. It simply is not as easy to read at night. Second, and more importantly, that itty-bitty LCD screen at the 5 is just too small to be read at a glance. I mean, okay, maybe if I'm 18 years old, okay. But I'm 44, going on 45, and I just can't read that thing. In summary, it gains points due to its new carbon core guard structure and the attractive way it carries out the purpose of a rugged, light, and shockproof watch, but it loses points in that it makes compromises to achieve this end. Now, the movement in both watches at this price level, well, that's nothing to write home about. The Square uses a pedestrian 1545 module, and it's not all that crisp and detailed, but it keeps good time. The 5611 module is used in the Casiaok, and it simply does what it needs to do. Now, this is not my area of expertise in any way, so if you want to fill me in and disagree, please feel free to do so. But it seems to me that neither movement seems to be a highlight of the wearing experience. I give them both a very ho-hum 6. Now let's talk about performance. By speaking about performance, we are asking the question, does the watch do what it sets out to do, and does it do so well? Having covered the attributes of both watches earlier on, and this category doesn't require a lot of rehashing of specs. Simply put, the Square performs extremely well in what it was designed to do. I give it an 8. I deduct points for pushers that are undersized and harder to use, and the display, I just think it could be sharper. I score the Casioak a 6. Now that might surprise some of you, but consider that while extremely cool, and it is cool, the GA2100 isn't easy to read in some color iterations, and the light is not extremely bright. The LCD screen is undersized, and while the day complication is extremely legible, I don't check the day complication multiple times a day. So really, I don't care. Both watches gain points for being rugged, and both watches gain points for being reliable. Now, quality can sometimes be a subjective category. How do you gauge quality? Do we place plastic watches alongside titanium watches and rate the plastic watches extremely low when their inherent properties actually serve a true purpose? I think quality needs to be judged based upon the purpose of the timepiece, and so I rate these both a strong but not outstanding 7. Both watches see deductions because of the crystal choice. They are watches that many will wear to swim, hike, and work on their transmissions on Saturday. They're going to get banged up. They're going to get used in muddy situations. They are called G-Shock, for goodness sake. So to put an easily scratched mineral crystal on these watches is, to me personally, just kind of disappointing. I understand that sapphire crystal is less shatter resistant than mineral crystal, but for me, I'm more likely to scratch a crystal than I am to shatter one. Furthermore, the fit and finish is good, but not great. They're both indicative of their budget price category, a solid 7. Durability, I'm going to give that a 9. What else can we say? These are among the most rugged watches money can buy, and they only cost $99 for goodness sake. 1 point is removed for the crystal, as mentioned previously. In terms of versatility, neither watch scores particularly high, and that's because they were designed to purpose and designed well to that purpose. I give the Square a 3 because I don't think that this watch suits a variety of situations very well. I just don't. I score the Casioak a little higher at 5 because the compromises made in function have traded off in form. For some reason, I can just see a young business person with a rebellious streak wearing a yellow Casioak under their suit. I'm not saying I would do that, but I know some who will. And so I think the Casioak is just a little bit more versatile because of its style. Our final category is value. And for some of you, value should be double weighted. Now, I'm not going to do that. Why? The older I get, the more I learn that value isn't everything. Some things in life that bring us the most joy are simply not a great value. Were that not the case, Lamborghini, Rolex, and Armani wouldn't exist. Still, value is very important to me because I'm not part of that Houdinki demographic. To that end, I scored the Square an 8 and the Casiaok a 7. Again, I think this is a bit subjective, but here's my reasoning. You can buy a Square for $60 US. That does everything the $99 model can do. For $60, you get a watch that can be run over by my F-150 and then go diving that afternoon. It is comfortable, well-sized, and reliable. How can you not rate that extremely high as a value proposition? Now, the Casiaok is still a high value proposition at $99. That is, if you can find one at that price. A lot of models, especially certain colorways, tend to run out, and their colorway releases seem to be pretty short-lived. So to me, with a higher starting price and factoring in inflated secondary market prices, coupled with the slightly less readability, it just places the Casiaok a little lower than the ubiquitous Square. So, what are our totals, and which one would I recommend? Well, if you add all of this up, we're going to give the DW5600 a 57 out of 80, which I think is a pretty respectable score for a watch that can be had for $60 to $100 US. We're going to score the GA2100 a very, very respectable 55 out of 80. And so that places, at least on paper, the Square as a winner by a small margin of 3 points out of 80. Really, I think at the end of the day, you can't go wrong with either option. They both make a fantastic addition to any collection. And if you watch reviews of hardcore collectors, guys that would drop $30,000 on a watch without even noticing, a lot of those guys have a $60 5600 in their collection. And so there's mad respect there for the G-Shock, even the most fundamental, basic G-Shock. And I think there's a lot of collectability in this new Casio GA2100. They're releasing new colorways, it seems, every month. And people are just really enjoying them. So both are good. Which one would I recommend? If you made me choose, I would suggest that you choose the one that you like the most. But if I really, really had to come down to it, I'd have to say the Square. I just think it's more readable. It's more classic. I think every watch collection should have at least one Square. And I don't really feel that way about the Casiaok. As great as it is, and as much as I enjoy it, and as often as I have to hold back on pressing that buy button, in Canada, the Squares are $150, and it is just so easy to want to buy one on impulse, especially when Casio releases 3 new colorways. I have to tell you, I'm really, really wanting one of those new transparent versions of both of these watches, and it's really hard to resist, and I probably will cave. In fact, I just bought another 5600 the other day. It's translucent blue and green. It's super funky, but I love it, and I'm going to be wearing that all summer at the beach. So, in short, you can't go wrong. They're both fantastic watches. They both have their limitations, they both have real high upsides, and they're both a great value. So whichever one you want, go out, click that buy button, because I think at the end of the day, you're not only going to enjoy it, you're going to use it, you're going to rely upon it. I mean, after all, it's a G-Shock.